Well, what could be more brutally funny than a skillet to the skull? Nevertheless, it works. Phil is here giggling. You're going to see this clip millions of times, and yet I think when you see the movie, you're still going to laugh at this particular scene.
Could it possibly have been 20 years since we first met every week to share our movie-going experiences with you? Yes, I'm afraid it was. And looking back at these tapes reminds me of how simply we started, shooting in the most basic of studios on the barest of sets, and with all of us learning the ropes of television production. As the years went by, we looked better and better. We added a sign, then some posters. And finally we produced on a real stage set and reached beyond local access TV to public broadcasting and eventually to national cable. All along, though, we never forgot why we did this. It was because we loved our families and we loved the movies. And tonight, for one night, we get to do it again. Please join us for a live edition of the Moviegoing Family. Good evening and welcome to the Moviegoing Family Reunion. I'm Phil Berardelli here with my dear friend and co-host Gary Arnold, spending the next hour discussing a topic that has possessed us for most of our lives, the movies. We're also here to celebrate a milestone. It has been 20 years since we began our weekly show on Arlington Community Television, now Arlington Independent Media. We stopped doing our show in 1990, but it lives on as a syndicated column called The Family Filmgoer by Jane Horwitz, our former co-host. So we can legitimately claim to have reached 20 years, if not always on the air, then at least elsewhere in the media and in spirit. During this first segment, Gary and I have decided to talk about two new movies about to open in the Washington area at the beginning of the holiday season. Plus, we'll catch up on one other attraction of 2006, now on home video, but one that we both consider a must-see. So to begin, Gary, I think we basically agree that James Bond is alive and well.
Yes, indeed he is, and after 44 years, too. It's nice to have a sense of continuity if you're having a 20th anniversary show. You did tell people that this is live and unrehearsed, correct?
It is live and unrehearsed.
Okay. They won't be seeing any film clips, so our vivid descriptions of scenes will have to suffice along with their own imaginations.
Not to deal with rights and clearances and all that kind of stuff. We're going to entertain people. We're going to talk.
This whole idea came as a load off my mind because about 16 years ago I got a whack on the head, and for week after week I was going to Reston to do the show, and you weren't there, and and I just didn't know what had happened. So it's back in Arlington now. Is that right?
In Arlington.
Okay, well, that's really reassuring.
So about James Bond.
About James Bond. Okay, Casino Royale has finally caught up with the official line of succession in the James Bond series.
Well, it's a full circle, right? It goes back to the original novel.
It is indeed, yeah, and they're pretending the past didn't exist in many respects.
Yeah.
Casino Royale was the first of the Ian Fleming James Bond movies, published in '53 in the UK, a year later here, but it did not get purchased by the producing team of Harry Saltzman and Albert Broccoli, who did most of the Bond movies. It was the one that got away. And it took almost a decade for the Bond character to get on the big screen, although he was adapted rather quickly for a Climax television series on CBS in '54. But Casino Royale was purchased originally by an agent named Charles K. Feldman, who did it in 1967 as a big comic extravaganza, imitating, for the most part, his last movie, which was What's New, Pussycat.
Yeah, which was equally as bad.
Yeah, by that time, five Bond movies had been made with Sean Connery. Yeah. But this was the one that was always sort of, the originator, but never was being done by the real James Bond company. Finally, it has been. This is number 21 in the official series. There is a new James Bond. The very accomplished British actor Daniel Craig. And I think they have succeeded in restarting in all kinds of very effective ways. I wasn't all that keen on the way it began because I missed in the main title credits, the late Maurice Binder's sinuous nudes. I mean, which before
the
a word
Bond
was
babes, you
yeah
missed the
yeah
Bond
before a
babes,
word
yeah.
was spoken, there was this atmosphere of double entendre that set you up very nicely. I think now they have cutouts with Bond action stuff going on, which isn't as satisfying. The first big set-piece action sequence is a chase around Madagascar at a construction site, and before the movie, there was a preview for the new Spider-Man film,
Right,
and we both had the sensation we were still seeing Spider-Man while
but
this chase
there was a big
going on.
difference. There was a big difference here, and I really liked that opening sequence. I really liked that chase. I thought, well, first of all, it's a chase on foot, and I thought, how are they going to make this exciting? Well, it turns out what they did was they hired this acrobat. I can't remember his name. It went by so quickly in the credits, and I forgot to check on the Internet Movie Database before we got here. But they hired a stuntman who is superb, and he does these gravity-defying leaps and rolls and dives. And a lot of that stuff was done, I think, I'm pretty sure, without the aid of wires or special effects at all. A lot of this stuff was done for real, and it's really nerve-wracking. I think at one point I saw you, and you were just
it's pretty impressive. Yeah, I was completely fooled. I mean, I don't know what was faked and what is real life, real time stunt work here. My quarrel with it was that I didn't have much stake in whatever was happening. I mean, you have no investment in what Bond is up to just yet.
Right, yeah.
For me, it didn't begin to click in until in a way they got this shakedown period over with. They'd had their first touches of humor. The first Bond babe had entered and departed. And by that time, they're sort of retrieving the original novel, which was one of the most effective, plot ideas I think they ever had. Although curiously enough, it obliged Bond to sit for most of the story, because he is assigned to break a paymaster, originally a Soviet paymaster, now a paymaster for international terrorists.
But in a card game.
Yeah, in a card game at a casino, and he fancies himself a master virtuoso card player, and he has been dipping into funds, and they figure if they can break him entirely, they'll break this particular ring. So for a good deal of the novel, Bond is at the casino table playing baccarat.
Yeah.
Okay, after that he gets kidnapped and tortured, so he is sitting in a cage chair getting tortured. After that, he needs about a month or two to recuperate.
So he's in the hospital.
Denouement. So they can't really go with that. But it's interesting, I think, how effective that card game in that situation remains. It was effective even in the bare bones sort of television adaptation.
Yeah.
It was effective in the farcical Casino Royale, partly because Orson Welles was playing the villain in that, and it was fun to watch.
Yeah.
At the baccarat table. Okay, the card game is different now too. It's Texas No Hold'em, which has become a television attraction in its own right since then. But the tension there really works. It makes me think that card games are foolproof cinematic material, because you're always going to be interested in what cards are in the hole, what's going to be turned over next.
I seem to recall, wasn't Bond playing, maybe it was Thunderball, but I seem to recall he was playing cards in Dr. No. There was a card game there.
He has been in and out of card games with some frequency.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that the original set that up so effectively makes it a good idea to always return to it.
But what is it? What is it about this movie? I mean, I really felt it was a fresh look at the Bond films. I thought the last few were pretty tired, and I don't think it was Daniel Craig, because I didn't like him as much. Certainly he's not going to replace Sean Connery in my affections for this character. Mm-hmm. But there was something about the way this movie was made. It felt slick, it felt fresh, it was gripping, it was exciting.
I think it's the ingredients. I think it's the whole package, and the fact that it has been repackaged so effectively. The series has been very effective at reinventing itself. I think
this is the fifth
most
Bond
of the
now,
new Bonds. This is the fifth actor who's played Bond, not counting the Casino Royale comedians originally. But and each new introductory film, I think, has been effective. On Her Majesty's Secret Service, with George Lazenby, who was short-lived, I think was one of the most scintillating movies of the series. Okay, and it worked for Roger Moore when he came in
for a while.
And he was sort of long-lasting also. The first Timothy Dalton installment, Living Daylights, I thought was very effective. And that sense of getting a new jump at it is back with this movie. But it's a combination of glamour, spectacular action stuff, the fact that they have a really core story that I think works effectively and has for 50 years now.
Yeah.
And there's a different kind of Bond in the role. Craig is probably the least good-looking Bond in the history of the series.
Yeah, he's very hard-edged.
But he is in great shape,
Yeah.
very intense.
He's very muscular.
And a very accomplished actor, too.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he has a really great sense of film acting. And in fact, he gave a great performance not so long ago in the movie called Infamous, with the second of the movies about Truman Capote during the In Cold Blood period.
Yeah,
in which he played
that.
one of the killers, Perry Miller, and he is sensational in that, and I think a plausible Oscar contender in that role. So yeah, he's a lot of actor coming into it. So yeah, there's just a lot going on,
Okay.
and there's a lot of movie to see, even a lot of movie to like, and the stuff you don't like is you're sort of forgotten by the time something
But
kicks
it's a
in
little
that you
it's a
enjoy.
little intense, I would say. It's a little racy, so I would say toward the older teens and adults.
I think so. Yeah. Take the PG-13
Pretty seriously.
seriously, and know your own kid. Yeah, what the threshold of acceptability will be.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it's the big movie of this weekend, probably the Thanksgiving weekend, and it will be a top flight attraction certainly for the rest of the year.
Okay. Let's go very quickly to the other two movies we wanted to talk about. The first one is For Your Consideration. It's a little movie by Christopher Guest. If you've seen the original repertory movies that he's done, Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show and A Mighty Wind, this is basically the same people playing, except now they're in the movie business. They're trying to make a movie, and there's some hijinks and some misdirections, but it doesn't really amount to much, does it? Yeah,
it was a mild disappointment for me because I've liked the Christopher Guest, Eugene Levy comedies a great deal, starting with Waiting for Guffman. And I think this is the single best comedy troupe in operation at the moment. This troupe is still fine. I think it's the pretext that is weak in this case. For people who aren't in the business, For Your Consideration is the prepositional phrase that appears on screeners sent to people who vote on Academy Awards consideration during the course of the year. Also to critics who have their own critical groups. So this is what you're cued to.
And the movie within a movie has this title.
It's called Home for Purim. There's several problems.
Yeah.
One, this low budget kind of shabby little movie is highly unlikely to be an Oscar contender on any grounds whatsoever, including far-fetched grounds. So it's hard to get a stake in it to begin with. So what you have to fall back on is the fact that there are some great comedy teams in it. Particularly the two, Don Lake and Michael Hitchcock, playing TV critics who have a great act going.
They're not as good as we are, though.
Well, they're probably funnier from
I don't know.
moment. And also Fred Willard and Jane Lynch, who are parodying a Hollywood Access type of team. They're extremely good in it.
Yeah.
It's just the basic plot pretext in this is weaker than you want it to be.
Okay. Well, we're going to break for a minute, and then we'll come back, and then maybe in the next segment we'll talk about United 93.
Okay,
so we will be back in just a minute. We ran long. Yes, feel free to applaud.
Well, that's good. I like that. It's running a bit low.
That was 12 minutes.
Okay, and it flew.
Yeah.
All right.
So why don't you come back, introduce the next segment. We'll finish up with United 93 pretty quickly.
We're driving home in the car, and she usually reads my reactions pretty well, even if I don't say anything. And she knew I didn't like this movie. And the first thing she said to me was, "Dad, how could you not like this movie? There was no sex in it. There were no drugs. There was no drinking. The profanity was at a minimum. What was wrong with this movie? Why didn't you like it?" And I was thinking to myself, well, you know, she's right. There is none of that stuff in this kind of movie. It is relatively free of that, as was John Hughes' last movie, Pretty in Pink. The problem with this movie, it's the kind of movie that I think gives parents nightmares, because it's about a child that is constantly, aggressively trying to deceive not only his parents but all authority figures. And it's set up in the kind of way that audiences will love this character and will sympathize with him. And that's why I found it very worrisome. Ferris Bueller played by Matthew Broderick, and I think it's the saving grace of the whole movie that Matthew Broderick was chosen and not another teen actor.
This begs the question, has John Hughes now become a bit of a forgotten name? He was the freshest young
was
humorist
big stuff in the 80s,
in the movies
yeah.
at that particular point. He had been one of the most distinctive writers in the National Lampoon magazine during the 1970s, and had actually done earlier drafts of some of his movies there, including what became National Lampoon's Vacation. But in this, by the time he directed his first movie in 16 Candles, he seemed ready to make a breakthrough, and he did.
1984, so
right,
it was a little before we started.
So he directed those early Molly Ringwald classics,
Yeah.
which are still very endearing, and I think are still cherished by all kinds of people who saw them for the first time during that period.
Yeah.
By the time he got to Ferris Bueller, I think it was beginning to sour a bit, and it was hard to really care for the Bueller character. But there's something about him that that seems to link up with modern movies. It's as if Ferris Bueller grew up and became about 50% of the screenwriters in Hollywood right now, because they place a premium on being able to deceive other people, specifically people in the audience. And I think this has gotten to the point where it's not only obsessive but awfully unattractive. I think it may have begun maybe in movies like The Usual Suspects. Which was one we weren't able to cover since we weren't on the air during all those years.
But I don't miss the fact that we haven't.
Right,
we
but
cover
I think there began to be a specialty in constructing movies so that fooling the audience was the only thing that mattered. Sort of psychological credibility and other things went by the board. I can't really say that was absolutely true in that case, because it did have a virtuoso performance by Kevin Spacey, which kind of anchored the movie.
Yeah, that's true. But I can give you two examples of things like that. Things where the critics went crazy, and I went to see these movies, and I thought, what in the world are they talking about? And one of them is called Pulp Fiction, which is rated R, which is Quentin Tarantino's big opus that preceded his Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, or whatever they're called.
Yeah, that almost seems like a more innocent age than Kill Bill.
I just found that movie to be reprehensible. I just found it to be unentertaining and grotesquely violent and too clever by half. And the other one that I was thinking about, but except it just flew right out of my head. So
another one by Tarantino?
No. What was the other? Oh, no, I got it.
Okay.
I got it. By two of my other favorites, the Coen brothers and Fargo, which critics went crazy about.
Yeah, we always had our problems with the Coens, it seemed to me, except on the occasion of Raising Arizona.
Which we both liked very much.
Yeah, I have a split sort of feeling about Fargo. That's I found the first part of it fairly detestable, but once Frances McDormand's character comes in the movie, I think she does affect some kind of
a pregnant
sea change
police
there.
sergeant.
Yeah, pregnant police sergeant who is the soul of honesty, which is a complete contrast with everybody else you've seen in the movie.
Could that be because she was married to one of the directors? Would that have anything to do with it?
I like to think that a certain amount of tenderness and solicitude crept into their makeup as a result of that. But it salvaged that movie because there was a human element at last in the work of young men who had sort of specialized in being sort of immune to sentiment and sort of beyond being fooled by anything soft-hearted, and I think it did flatter their work on that occasion.
So in the last 20 years, and actually the last 16 since we stopped doing the show, I can think of a couple of trends that I've perceived, even from the distance. I mean, you've been working in the movies steadily ever since. I mean, you've been the Washington Times movie critic, and you still are. And you've been writing steadily and seeing movies. I've kind of drifted into other areas, so I don't see as many movies as you do. But there are two things that I've noticed, and one is the technical aspects of movies have never been better. I mean, movies look better, they sound better. There's a movie that I saw last year called Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. That was directed by Michael Mann, and a number of his films I liked very much, but this film was kind of detestable. But the distinctive thing about it is that it was shot on high-definition video, which allowed it to be shot at night in the city without any particular special effects. They used natural ambient lighting, and the film looks just amazing, but there's just nothing to it, so technically. And also the computer, the advent of computer technology, you get much, much more complex images, but I'm not so sure that they work very well. For example, the last Star Wars movie, The Revenge of the Sith, had battle sequences that went on and had seemingly thousands of elements, but they were completely uninvolving. And I remember movies back from the 50s and 40s that used models, little cardboard models that were more effective than this.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that I find troublesome about the movies is that intellectually and dramatically and emotionally, they seem to be, with a few great exceptions, but generally they seem to be less interesting while they become more technically proficient.
Yeah, well, any new instrument, I mean, causes as many problems as it helps to solve, and I think that's clearly true with the computer generation revolution, whatever it was. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it entered, I think, with Jurassic Park in a big way, because that movie had begun with the special effects guys working with models and thinking that they were going to do a kind of advanced stop motion.
Yeah.
Right in the middle, it became possible to do visualization or illustration with computers that made that look, less impressive. So they had to juggle things and do it both. Yeah, I think it's satisfying in that movie. The sort of morphing effects in the second Terminator were fun. Even when they invent certain kinds of imaginary creatures in antiquity, like the Lord of the Rings spectacles did, it's fun. But by the time we get to, say, Peter Jackson's remake of King Kong a year ago, things are all off because the scale in chase sequences is wrong. The scale in all kinds of things is wrong.
Well, they're hugely overblown. It's like they do things because they think they can. In the original King Kong, he battles a T-Rex, and they're both stop motion, and he wins the battle. But it's really quite exciting still. I just saw it a few weeks ago, and it's still an incredible movie. But in the new King Kong, not only does King Kong battle a T-Rex, he battles 3 of them. And he battles 3 of them with one arm because he's got the girl in the other arm, and he's fending off these monsters, and they're all computer generated. And then even that's not enough. They go trailing down a ravine, and they're hanging from vines, and the dinosaurs are snapping at them.
It's necessary,
it's too much.
to project yourself into some completely imaginary realm, because photorealism disappears in a lot of these CGI chase sequences. And Pearl Harbor was a glaring example because the aerial combat scenes were all out of scale in terms of any kind of real life depiction of that kind of combat. But I think a lot of younger people may make that adjustment, and they think of these as entirely imaginary worlds in which they don't necessarily have to relate them back to a real world, real-time, photorealistic world. It's difficult for people of our generation to do that, but I think with young people growing up with computers, maybe playing with them themselves so that they kind of jump over the drawing, making models,
and a lot of them do. And
making
with
play
figures,
figures,
they're a lot more
stuff.
familiar.
Maybe it's their natural progression anymore.
But there's one genre that uses CGI that you're very fond of, because for the last few years I've been hearing you rave about certain things like Cars and some of the now the titles are escaping me again. But you've been going to these are basically G-rated movies, or a mild PG, and they're for kids, and they're entirely computer generated.
Right.
And some of them have been really quite good.
Yeah. Well, everything from Pixar has been good. I mean, this is a positive development that we missed. We were just there for the resurgence of traditional Disney animation with The Little Mermaid. Unfortunately, we didn't get to talk about Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and The Lion King and some of the other things that were follow-ups. But simultaneously, there were these people, many of them former Disney animators, who were able to make a feature with completely computerized imagery. Toy Story being the first, and then every
subsequent... Which you liked quite a bit, right?
Yeah, and every subsequent Pixar animated feature has been superior. Also superior in terms of story construction. And now it's reached the point where Pixar and Disney have merged. They're the same operation and the leader in terms of motion picture animation at the moment. Yeah, that has been one of the most positive aspects,
Any favorites among those computer-generated features? I mean,
well, there's just a lot of good stuff. I mean, recently I saw Flushed Away, which is from the Aardman group in
playing right
England.
Now.
Yeah, it's for there right now. Which their specialty.
And that's like faux
claymation? Their specialty was clay animation.
Yeah.
So they've tried to imitate the look of that, but doing it with computers. And I think it was probably necessary to do this because there's so much stuff going on, so much action in such complicated, water-filled kind of settings that it makes more sense to do it this way.
I'm not sure how you do claymation with water. I think that may not.
But yeah, I like their first feature a lot, Chicken Run, the Ice Age animated films, which is another apparatus entirely have also
Yeah.
been very good. But the Pixar movies from Toy Story through Bug's Life and Monsters, Inc. and The Incredibles and now Cars have been exceptional pieces of storytelling, too.
So there's something to look forward to.
Yeah, they
there.
are definitely the leader in the business in that,
Okay.
that respect.
Time for another break. We'll be back in a minute.
And the movie seems very promising, I think, for the first half. It's called The Color of Money, which I think is a lackluster
Oh, I guess I forgot to mention
title.
that, didn't I?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's, my little girl came in and looked at our poster today and said, you know, there's something weird about that poster. Their names are so much bigger than the title. And indeed, the names Newman and Cruz loom a lot larger than The Color of Money, which
Maybe
is a
that's why I
lackluster
forgot,
title.
as a matter of fact.
Right. Well, there's something very promising here because we've got the Felsen character as an older man. His competitive instincts and his interest in the game are rejuvenated by seeing a young guy who's a little like him or seems like him. The young man, played by Cruz, has a girlfriend, played by Mary Elizabeth Mastro Antonio, who acts as his manager. And so Newman approaches them, makes them an offer to sort of take them on the road, you know, show them the ropes, develop the Cruz character as a professional hustler and ultimately as a professional sort of competitive player. The movie's swimming along very, very nicely and promisingly for the first half, but something stalls in mid-passage. And what happens is that the two younger characters drop out, and it becomes kind of a study in pool exhibitions and
It's
in the
kind of
iconic
Rocky plays pool with
right in the
trumpets.
iconography of Paul Newman's image as a star in you know, late middle age. It loses all sort of narrative drive, all senses.
A regular feature of the old show was to recommend movies on video, usually which had some thematic or stylistic link up with the new movies we had reviewed. We're going to do that again, but now all those movies are in DVD, I believe.
That's
There's
true.
this new format.
We can't really
Yeah.
say DVD, but before we do that,
Okay.
we missed one in the first segment that we've got to...
That's right. The movie Phil and I think of as the
movie of the
year. United 93 recently reached the home video market a couple of weeks ago, and we don't want to let the evening pass up without recommending it. It seems to me it's a movie that kind of shatters all genres, and it's also easy to understand why people might make excuses to delay seeing it or maybe not seeing it all in a theatrical setting.
It's very
I think
heavy going.
People might feel they'd
very
lose
intense.
it,
And
especially in a group.
You only saw it on video.
I only saw it very
I saw it
recently,
on the screen,
right.
and
Yeah.
it was
Well, that's because we
overwhelming.
kept missing dates to see it
Yeah,
together.
we
I
kept
think.
missing
Yeah,
dates.
sure.
But it depicts the events on September 11th with the fourth plane, United Flight 93, which was bound for, I think, Los Angeles,
Yes, yeah.
and was hijacked over Pennsylvania, turned around, and was headed to Washington. By then, there was a miracle that not many people realize. That plane was delayed on the ground for 40 minutes. It was due to take off earlier. And had it taken off earlier, it might have actually completed its mission. But because of the delay, when it was hijacked, people on the plane started calling home. And they heard what had happened to the trade towers in the Pentagon. So they knew what was going on. They knew they were not being hijacked to be taken somewhere. They knew that that plane was going to be forced into a building, probably the Capitol or the White House in Washington. And these people decided to take action and not go quietly. It's the first bit of heroism in the war against terrorism, and it's beautifully, beautifully depicted. It's very intensely depicted by Paul Greengrass, by his cast. It is a dramatization. It is not a documentary, but the one thing that he does, when that plane is finally on its the fateful part of its mission, you never see it from the outside. It's always from the inside. He tries to put you in that situation and try to make you think, what would you do if you were there and you knew this was going on and you knew that you were going to die? Would you have the courage to fight back like these people did? It was just overwhelming.
Yeah, no, he has a very vivid sense of immediacy and tension. And I think, you know, towards the end of the movie, I mean, you may, you know, really feel as if you're going down,
Yeah.
and if that's the last moment of your life.
Yeah.
Another movie not so long ago, I think, had a similar sort of effect. It was the movie called Castaway that Tom Hanks was in during
Yeah.
the picture of the plane, you know, crashing in the sea.
That was a
and
very
being
intense plane
flooded.
crash.
Yeah. That also, I think, gives you that sense that that your life may be close to ending.
But that was fictional.
Right,
This
right.
was based on reality.
It's real, but yeah, it's an extraordinary piece of work, and every moment in it is haunted by your knowledge of what actually happened. But his method of depiction, I think, is so sound that he is able to sort of highlight every banal, ordinary thing that happens to those people. The people in the traffic control centers who are the focus of attention early, and then the passengers inside Flight 93 later on. I mean, all the etiquette of getting onto a plane, of getting settled in, talking
very
small talk.
Very ordinary
every
stuff.
single word, every single gesture takes on an added
poignancy,
and magnitude.
Yeah.
I think because of the nature of this particular story, and it demonstrates on one thing that that it doesn't diminish something by knowing what's going to happen. If a dramatization is done correctly, it may be even more powerful because you know
what's
actually
coming.
what's going to happen. To these
Well,
people.
that was Alfred Hitchcock's old rule, that if the audience knows and the characters don't, that's the most intense situation possible.
Yeah.
And that's what you've got here.
Yeah, and it reminds you of this curious sort of immortalizing effect the movies have. By pretending to reenact the last hours of these people's lives, you do have the illusion that they are still alive, that one odd thing might happen to change things. For instance, the fact that the 93 is on the ground for so long, I think it rattles the nerves of the hijackers, for one thing. And the longer it's there, you think, well, if just the word goes out to not let any plane go up in the air, which does come a bit later, those people would have been saved also.
That's right.
Yeah, but I mean, because the delay in that particular realization dooms them ultimately too. It's an extraordinary movie, and not like anything else. And I'd love to see it, do very well in the award period. It was well reviewed, but was not a theatrical success, and maybe there's no way it can be. But it would behoove Hollywood, I think, not to ignore this during the Oscar season, even though Dreamgirls and other things will be up there saying, please.
So on to video picks?
Yes, do.
And I'm first, right?
Oh, you're first up
I'm
this?
first,
Okay,
yes.
all right.
I think one problem that has characterized the James Bond series over the years, it has become too overblown, too reliant on gigantic set pieces that just strain credibility, to the point where maybe it's impossible for that organization ever to get back to simpler and deeper stories. But there are taut and intelligent and well-proportioned thrillers out there, and one of the best is The Bourne Supremacy from 2004, rated PG-13, the sequel to the equally sensational Bourne Identity from 2002. This one directed by Paul Greengrass, who did United 93. Jason Bourne is terrifically played by Matt Damon, who must defend himself against the CIA because they mistakenly think he has executed one of their operatives. It's an extremely gripping story with good performances, and it features a spectacular car chase through the streets and tunnels of downtown Moscow, of all places. For high schoolers and up, it's a borderline R. Yeah,
a stunt I guess James Bond could never have done in the old days.
No, probably not.
In the course of the show, I'm not doing cars yet. I'm doing
You're doing Sour Grapes.
Sour Grapes, right. One of the performers in the ensemble of For Your Consideration is an actor named Craig Bierko, who Phil and I have grown very fond of. But Phil has still not seen his greatest single comedy performance in the movies. And this was in a 1998 Larry David comedy called Sour Grapes, which remains his first and only movie written directly for the screen to date. He did it right after leaving the
Seinfeld.
or shuttering the Seinfeld series, and the plot will make you think, oh, this is something that very easily could have been done with the Seinfeld characters. Craig Bierko and Steven Weber are cast as cousins who live in New York. With their girlfriends, they take a gambling trip to Atlantic City. Hey, the gambling angle, too, I forgot about that. That ties in. And
very astute.
Yes, while playing these slot machines, Craig's character runs out of money. He's gone flat busted. Cousin Steven lends him some quarters to play the machine, at which point he cashes in. After that, a huge dispute begins to them over whether Craig owes Steven half of his winnings, because otherwise he wouldn't have had the 50 cents to play on the big jackpot. And this is, an extremely funny movie in that misanthropic, incorrigible way that Larry David has made distinctive. And so, do catch up with Sour Grapes before much more time goes along. Yeah.
And
rated R, definitely.
Rated R, definitely.
Yes, there are gross and profane things in it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we didn't talk very much about, for your consideration, but for my second pick, I'd like to recommend a much better movie about the movie business, also directed by Christopher Guest. From 1989, it's The Big Picture, rated PG-13 for language and sexuality. Kevin Bacon stars as a young, talented film school graduate who begins to work his way into the industry in Hollywood until some missteps and misjudgments threaten to cost him his career, his wife, and his best friend. It's basically a sweet-tempered story as written by Guest and Michael Varhol, and it's both an affectionate look at an ambitious young movie makers and a satirical look at how easily the perceptions of movie executives can be swayed. And it's very funny and includes shtick by Martin Short as Kevin Bacon's agent for high schoolers and up.
Right. Cars, the latest of the Pixar animated spectacles, entered the home video market about 2 weeks ago, and I recommend it as one of the ideal Christmas presents for the holiday season. One of the major hits of the summer, and I think particularly for people who love things automatic, it will be irresistible. Which is another reason I think you need to see this movie eventually, because John Lasseter, who was the founder of Pixar, and its president and guiding spirit, was personally behind this one.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons being that his father used to be a salesman or a manager of an automotive parts store. Yeah, and it teams with car creatures of various kinds, ultimately embarked in a story that might have suited Tom Cruise in his youth, which was, a cocky young racing vehicle who needs his ears pinned back, and that having been done, he becomes a better auto for it.
So Days of Thunder and animation and
prodigiously inventive in terms of slapstick animation, slapstick comedy, but also very, very tender, especially about small towns, because what improves them is being stuck in a small town in the Southwest that is kind of also stuck in time. So there's a great deal of nostalgic stuff about the 1950s, about the 1960s, about the car culture and the small town culture of those periods, and I think it's an irresistible movie.
Okay. Going back to 1987 for my next pick, it's Empire of the Sun, rated PG-13 for violence. Oh, actually it's not. It's rated PG, I'm sorry. For violence and emotional intensity. I consider this to be Steven Spielberg's masterpiece, though it's one of his least known movies. It contains stunning images not for their scenic beauty, but for their emotional impact and Spielberg's genius at telling stories with pictures. Based on the autobiographical novel by J.G. Ballard, it involves the son of a British middle-class family living like royalty in Shanghai, China, just before the Japanese invasion at the outbreak of World War II. Spielberg, at the peak of his talent, devises images and sequences unlike anything else in the movies. Of these, there are many, but three in particular stand out, and I'm sure you remember these. One is a caravan. I just lost my prompter. I can't read my prompter.
What about this caravan?
Okay, I'll have to, oh, there it is. There it is.
Was it headed to Samarkand?
I think I'll ad-lib this one. There are three sequences that he portrays. One is a caravan of limousines, and they go through Shanghai, and they're carrying the British aristocracy past all of the poor people, and they're all dressed in costumes. It's one of the most surreal things and surreally beautiful things I've ever seen. There's a second sequence involving a glider thrown by the young boy Jim, the protagonist, played by Christian Bale. And there is a fighter attack on a Japanese base that is just, it'll blow you away. It is just one of the finest things. No computer images. This is done with real P-51 Mustangs dropping bombs on this airstrip. And it is an amazing movie.
Yeah, and I guess the beginning chapter of what turned out to be a World War II trilogy for Spielberg, and with Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan being the later chapters, and certainly holding up that particular
and I forgot theme. And I forgot to mention, the reason I mentioned this is because, like United 93, which we think may be a forgotten movie this year and we think deserves high praise, I think Empire of the Sun in 1987 was in that situation as well.
I may have the forgotten comedies of forgotten comedies in the 1990s for you now, because Sour Grapes is relatively well known compared to Denise Calls Up, which was the same year, 1998.
I've never even heard of it.
Written and directed by a young humorist named Hal Salwen, S-A-L-W-E-N, and he has never been able to get another feature off the ground since then. But maybe there is such a thing as being too clever for your own good. This is a movie about three young dating couples in New York City. The best-known people in the cast were Tim Daly, Liev Schreiber, who I think also was a friend of the director and had a hand in financing the movie, and Ada Turturro, who later became immortal to us as Tony Soprano's sister. Right.
Yeah.
They are busily making engagements, making plans to do things, but they never get around to doing them because they were always on the phone. These 6 characters conduct every transaction in their life over the telephone. They make plans, they're going to do this, that, and the other, but they never really get out of the house or out of the office, but where they're always on the phone. And he actually sustained a clever 80-minute comedy on this particular element of social fear, and with the fact of having your telephone transmissions being the thing that separates you from people rather than makes it easier, for you to to have a social life.
And this actually played in town, because I don't ever remember seeing it.
Yeah, it did play. Yeah, no, it was here for 2 or 3 weeks and was well reviewed, as a rule, but did not catch on, of course.
But it's on video now.
It is. I'm not even sure it's on DVD. I know it was on VHS because I have a copy right in my briefcase, as a matter of fact. But whether it ever made the new format, I do not know. I wouldn't count on it. So you might have to search for it in catalogs or over the internet. But it's a little gem that is worth finding.
Okay. Actually, I think we're probably out of time for our video picks. And when we come back, we are going to try something for the first time ever on the Moviegoing family. So we'll see you in a minute. Who wants to be first? You got to be one of the biggest disasters that you may see, because it is an enormous subject. It is a powerful story. It could have said great things politically, and it does none of these things. It trivializes them, in fact, in some ways. And this is not a movie I'm going to tell you to stay away from. I think you should go see this movie, see if you agree with me. In some ways, it treats the subject in as racist a way as the system that it's decrying. At least that's what I think. Now, we don't have any clips to show you. They didn't arrive in time, but we'll try to give you an idea of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it seems to me that if Donald Woods really was as devoted to Biko as he says in his books, he would be profoundly embarrassed by this movie, because what happens in a really disastrous structural way is that the Biko character dies halfway through it, and there is nothing that they can do with the rest of the film. The focus shifts to the plight of Donald Woods and his family. Will they be able to get out of South Africa without being detained? Yeah. And for the life of him, Attenborough cannot make this particular plight look at all urgent.
Well, he turns it into a suspense story.
Well, I'm not sure he even does that, because it began to look a lot like Clockwork to me, partly because Clockwise, probably because Penelope Wilton, who was in that, is also playing Mrs. Woods. But nevertheless, they simply do not succeed, I think, in...
Just coming back on you?
Coming back on me.
Okay.
And we are back on me. Welcome back once more. You may have noticed that we have an audience in the studio with us tonight, but I have to confess, they're all friends and family, brought here to mark this anniversary and to cheer us on. In this last segment, we're going to talk with them about the movies and see what they find compelling or annoying about them. So we'll start with a question from Terry and see where it leads us.
For this year's Oscars, what are your picks for Best Actor and Best Actress?
Ooh, it's a little early for that.
It probably is a little premature, although when you come to think of it, there are only 6 weeks of eligibility left. I have a feeling that for Best Actor, it may be Forrest Whitaker playing Idi Amin in the movie called The Last King of Scotland. My personal favorite is a British actor named Toby Jones, who is the one who plays Truman Capote in Infamous, which is playing now at only one theater in Washington, but would be ideal for a place like the Arlington Cinema and Draft House on the Rebound. Curiously enough, there were these 2 movies about Truman Capote at the time of In Cold Blood being made more or less simultaneously. The one called Capote got into release last year, won an Academy Award for Philip Seymour Hall. If he won, or Philip Seymour Hoffman, and but the more formidable performance is really Toby Jones in Infamous, the second Truman Capote movie. Doug McGrath, the writer-director, gets into areas that they did not in the first movie. Also, he's an experienced writer and dramatizes a lot of things fully. And they're very good performances by Jones, first of all, by Sandra Bullock as Harper Lee, and especially by Daniel Craig in the supporting category as Perry Smith, one of the killers. I have a feeling that the Best Actress thing may be being set up for Beyonce Knowles in the movie version of Dreamgirls, but we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and of course we're rooting for United 93's Best Movie, but it's hard to tell whether it would be competitive in an Oscar situation.
Okay. So. Rosemary.
Yes, Phil and Gary, it's good that you are both passionate about movies 20 years later, and it's kind of fun to be here and part of this
Foolishly passionate.
anniversary show. One of the things I have always appreciated about the show was the ratings, telling what are good for the PG-13, and so parents could help guide their children and what not to see. And I'm wondering if you've noticed any trends over 20 years, if the ratings have changed at all. For example, PG-13. Is a PG-13 rating in 2006, would it be similar to a PG rating, say, in 1990? Have you noticed, different level of sophistication or sexuality or violence or...
Well, as I said, Gary has been involved with this absolutely continuously since then, and I've been sort of back and forth. But I can tell you why the show was my idea. And the reason I wanted to have a show like this was that I found the rating system inadequate to really give you an idea of whether a particular movie is suitable for a certain age group. And I'll give you a couple of examples. If you can believe it, Jaws was rated PG. Now, Jaws is one of the most frightening movies ever made. It had adults running, screaming out of the theater. It gave people nightmares. That's a PG movie. But as years progressed, there's been this sort of rating creep. And now, anytime, and you can take preteens, basically, and if you tell them that you want to take them to a PG movie, a lot of times they'll cringe because PG is now equated with G. And the G rating is so narrowly focused and defined that if there's anything at all, the slightest thing off color about G, it pops into the PG rating. PG-13 is the problematic rating because there's a lot of material in PG-13 movies that I think are inappropriate for kids, and yet they're rated PG-13. There is no solution beyond parents paying attention to the movies, choosing movies carefully for their kids, and trying to rely on sources. Now, we're not on the air anymore, but there are several good websites that are involved. And Jane's column every week, The Family Film Goer, is a fairly good guide to this. So there are things out there. It's not any simpler that I can see.
In a way, it's almost become moot unless you insist on going to movies in first run, which I think many families may not. Because now the lag time between a theatrical release and a video release is about 3 months. Sometimes it's even less. So you're in a position, I think, as parents to take advantage of whatever that first wave of opinion is. You would know maybe from movie-going friends who like to go to things right away, what might be suitable, what might not. But at least you now have a barrier between you and the movie if you want to wait and see it on video. I mean, it's just easier and cheaper to sort of examine things in advance. Parents who subscribe to Netflix, say, can look at anything they might wonder is a little questionable in advance, and then know one way or the other whether they thought this was appropriate for their children. There's probably not a single rating that hasn't become more permissive to some extent since the system was inaugurated in 1968, including G, because I think certain kinds of sort of barnyard humor and things like that in animated features will now get by with the G rating, and it might not have at one time. But the G category has become more busy in recent years because there are just more people making animated features and sort of clever, fast-moving comic animated features, which sometimes specialize in slightly, naughty jokes.
Now, see, that's a new development because when we were doing the show, it wasn't quite that way. So this is something that's come on.
Yeah, there have been years in the past in which the G seemed to have dried up almost entirely, since so few people, apart from Disney, were doing family movies in a systematic way. I mean, that whole area of production has expanded in recent years, as production has expanded throughout the business because of home video, which once it came along in 1983, there was this backup market for every single movie and for the distributors. They didn't necessarily have to make their money in first-run theatrical engagements. You could do it slower and over a long period of time. But as a result of that, things move through the system much more rapidly. A higher volume of movies are made. Many of them have have little or no theatrical identity at all, but the advertising campaigns for all those movies are reused in home video and cable later on, so it's just more economical. And we have kind of a vertical integration system in operation again, and some of the the rational things about that operate now, and I think maybe to the benefit of parents. The rating system was always a slightly hypocritical construction because within the industry it was meant to ward off or discourage censorship boards in municipalities or states.
Yeah.
A few of which existed in 1968. The system was pretty successful in doing that. Whether it was successful in its aim for the general public, which was to inform parents about content and the suitability of given movies, is a matter of debate. I think it's a system that's always needed and is always defective. And but now, 38 years later, the first children who were affected by that now are grown-ups and have children of their own. And I think we're going to have it with us, or we'll need something like it indefinitely. In fact, I think even this culture could live with a stricter censorship system than it seems willing to at the time being.
Okay,
So.
I think somebody? Yes. But, okay, while the microphone is being handed over, I said that the show was my idea. I didn't want to just take too much credit here, because the reason that the show lasted for so long and was so successful was that I was lucky enough to have as my co-host one of the finest movie critics in America, and as you see tonight, about the depth and articulation of his knowledge.
Well, thank you for mentioning it. You forgot to mention our one watchword, though.
Our watchword?
Yeah, dignity.
Dignity. Always dignity.
Always dignity, yeah.
Yes, dear.
Jules.
Jules.
Which animated movie do you think was the best done or had the best animation done for it?
Ever?
Well, in the past 10 years or so.
Oh, in the past 10 years. You're going to have to ask.
That's a tough one.
Grandpa,
I mean, it would be hard to choose, don't you think? Because there have been a lot of really sensational animated features. Everything from Pixar I've liked. I've even liked the Disney animated films that supposedly were disappointments. Things like Lilo and Stitch. Remember how much we liked that? The Emperor's New Groove. That was supposedly not up to par. I think they were making superior things, even as the traditional cell animation operation was phasing out a bit, and now we're going to have a combination of those traditions. But I think it's hard to choose one title. Do you have one yourself that you've been fonder of?
I really did like Cars, and I liked Flushed Away a lot.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Some very recent ones.
Okay. And we still haven't seen Happy Feet and several other things yet. Okay. Right.
But have you ever
Sorry.
seen Dumbo?
Half of it.
Half of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
See, that movie is what? That was 1941. This is 2006. So that's 65 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think that's the best one ever.
Yeah.
And with Pinocchio, very close second.
Pinocchio tends to be my favorite of that particular
Very close second.
particular period. But it's but it has been revitalized. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean Disney and that tradition, and in a way, it's been revitalized in a form that makes the old one obsolete. But I don't think it makes it obsolete in terms of sentiment and aspiration in terms of the people who are the most creative people involved in the animation field right now. So.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Marie.
I'm sorry.
You were talking about claymation. Which do you prefer, the fake claymation or like the old claymation, like with the old Wallace and Gromit and places? Like, which do you prefer?
I think I prefer that, but I can see sort of practical problems in finishing a movie within 4 or 5 years if you're working with the plasticine figures and the model sets they have to make for that particular way of constructing a movie. I think when an opportunity to maybe speed it up comes along with certain projects, that they probably have to take that option. But I do like that form of animation among many others. And if young people are starting off, I think that's what they should do. They should make cutouts. They should do their own illustrations on drawings and shoot one frame at a time. You can do that with a video camera, I assume.
Yes, you can.
Okay,
Yes, you can.
and
if it's a digital video camera.
okay,
yes.
right, yeah, and they should get modeling clay and make funny models and see what can happen if you try to sustain something homemade for 1 minute. And that's all you need to do. It's tough to do, but it's great training because if you can really compress 1 or 2 ideas into a minute worth of amusing movie time, you will have accomplished something, yeah.
Well, I can tell you, my daughter Melissa, who's sitting right here, and I made a cut paper animation movie one time called Mouse in the Rain. It was about a little mouse walking across the paper in raindrops. The whole sequence of the mouse and the raindrops lasted, what, 10 seconds? Something like that. It took us, what, 6 hours to do that, moving each little individual raindrop? So it's an interesting exercise because it does show you in a very direct way how difficult it can be to get anything really good on the screen. So I think his suggestion was a good one. Jess, do you have a question?
Oh, well, I was just going to ask, I keep reading about that movies aren't doing so well at the box office. I mean, you know, receipts, and every week they have the box office mojo, and supposedly, you know, movies aren't financially doing as well as in the past compared to what they cost to make. At least, you know, I keep reading that. Do you know why that is?
I don't believe
is
it.
That so?
I think it's a poor-mouthing myth.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I don't think there's any way you can lose money off a movie investment now, unless it's just completely unpresentable to begin with. And my feeling now that audience is fragmented to such an extent that even stuff that most of us would consider unpresentable probably have a public out there someplace. They just haven't been located yet.
Here's a perfectly reliable guide.
So.
Last night when we went to see the Bond screening at the Mazza Gallery Theater, outside were posters of the movies that were playing. One of the movies was a movie called Saw 3. Now, if ever there was
would we have been able to face those movies?
But as I've told people over the years, why is there a Saw 3? Because Saw 2 made money. They only keep remaking movies if the movies make money. Maximum repulsion horror movies are difficult for me to deal with anymore, and I think they've overshot what I would have considered a level of tolerance in the 1980s and 1990s. But they're also relatively inexpensive to make. They almost always have newcomers in them. You know, people who don't make large salary demands. They're usually made quickly, economically. And there's no way they can lose money, given the worldwide audience for horror. Santa Claus 3 is opening this season. Last night we saw the trailer for Spider-Man 3. I mean, obviously, somebody's making money here. So.
Yeah, a book was published last year called The Big Picture by Edward Epstein, who in previous years has sort of specialized in political reportage, but has become interested in show business in the last several years. And this is the movie that updates the way the movie business operates now, more concisely and comprehensively than anything else. So, yeah, if you don't have a copy of that, I would read it. Essentially, it's been a change to something that essentially imitates the old Disney model, which is create something that can be reproduced, preserved indefinitely, and that's what happens. We now have all these franchise motion pictures, which are kind of the cornerstone of many distributors now, instead of just one, which sort of monopolized the fairy tale market at one time. Now it covers the whole gamut of movie genres.
Okay, we are almost out of time, and before we go, there is one thing I want to do. I want to thank the people that worked on our show years ago who are here in the studio audience tonight, and even though they don't want to say anything, I would like to introduce Gary's lovely daughter, Pauline, who was a regular crew member on our show for a long, long time. Right at my camera behind there, I don't know if we can get a shot of Dick Schwartzbard, who has been a loyal crew member and member of the Moviegoing family for many years. And in the control room is our wonderful director, Rick Hurd, who lit this beautiful set tonight and arranged all of this stuff at a moment's notice. Rick is back in there calling the shots. Somewhere next to him is Kathy Overton, who's been a regular crew member, and
Jackie Stephen, who
Jackie
loaned us her time tonight, I believe, among other things. But
well, she devoted a great deal of time to us, both today, and she's working on the crew tonight. So now we really are out of time. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed our return to TV as much as we have. And if so, and if you're motivated, please drop us an email sometime. You can reach us at moviegoingfamily, that's one word, @gmail.com. Good night.
Because you've got, and I think the play's values are a little balled up too, because it seems as if the author wants to to endorse the fact that someone is saying a big final no to life and imagines that this is kind of a brave response. It isn't in this situation, whereas it might have been in a play like Whose Life Is It Anyway, where you have a situation in which somebody who is physically active is then deprived of that. But at least this thing was argued out from both points of view. There's no argument here because the mother is too dumb to put up any kind of argument.
It's no contest
She doesn't
at all.
seem to care. It would make more sense if she just doesn't know what's going on, I think, somehow.
Yeah.
So there we are, I think, with an unrewarding version of perhaps an overrated play.
Okay.
Okay, and then The Other Girl Next Door.
The Other Girl Next Door in Deadly Friend. Boy, oh boy. I've never been a fan of Wes Craven, so I can't confess that this is going to start me on. There it goes.
Yes, what do we tell you?
There it goes.
Night,
Okay, as
Mother.
you